I was still holding the pie when my father told me not to come home again. It was warm pecan, her favorite. I'd baked it the night before, using Mom's old recipe, the one with extra cinnamon and that weird half-teaspoon of honey she always insisted on. I drove 3 hours in rain to bring it to her like I did every year. It was Thanksgiving. I was home. Or I thought I was. We hadn't even said grace yet. The turkey hadn't been carved. The stuffing was steaming in the crystal dish my mother only brought out once a year. And I was still standing, still smiling, still holding that pie when Dad said, "Give back the $50,000, Valerie." Or, "Don't bother coming home again." At first, I thought I'd misheard him, or that it was some kind of tasteless joke. Dad wasn't a man prone to theatrics, and Thanksgiving wasn't a time for drama, not in our family, or at least not until that night. But no one laughed. Sarah sat across the table, hands folded in her lap like she was at a funeral. Michael looked at the tablecloth. Even Mom's sweet, soft-spoken mom refused to meet my eyes. I didn't sit down. I couldn't. The pie tray rested in my palms, suddenly heavier than it should have been. I glanced at it stupidly as if it could explain what was happening. "Excuse me," I said. Dad's jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." "What exactly are you accusing me of?" Sarah finally looked up. Her eyes were red mascara, clinging to the corners like she'd been crying for hours, but her voice was clear. "Mom's account. $50,000 disappeared last month, right after you helped her set up online banking." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was true that I'd helped Mom with her accounts. She'd been nervous about going paperless, something about not trusting the cloud. So I'd sat with her on a Sunday afternoon, walked her through the app, the passwords, the security questions. She even wrote everything down in a little notepad we kept in the kitchen drawer. That was 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks. Now they were telling me that was the moment I stole from her. "Are you serious?" I whispered. "You think I took Mom's money?" Michael finally spoke, his voice stiff, like it hurt to say the words. We didn't want to believe it, but the bank confirmed the withdrawals were done online. No one else had access. No one else except me. I looked at Mom. She didn't flinch, didn't nod, didn't shake her head, just picked up her napkin and pressed it to her mouth like she might be sick. That's when it hit me. The pie, the traffic, the yearly ritual, none of it mattered. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a suspect. I set the pie down very gently on the edge of the counter. The tin clicked faintly against the granite. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair where I'd laid it earlier. I didn't speak. "You have until the end of the week," Dad said quietly behind me. "Then we go to the lawyer." I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream or curse or hit the steering wheel like they do in movies. I just drove coat still half-buttoned the pie, still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter behind me. The streets were quiet, lit by porch lights and paper turkeys taped to windows. It was Thanksgiving night, and the whole town smelled like gravy and cinnamon and peace except me. I checked into the same roadside inn I always passed on the way into town, but never had a reason to stop at. The clerk didn't ask why I needed a room on a holiday. I was thankful for that small mercy. The room smelled like old carpet and microwave popcorn. I kicked off my boots and sat on the edge of the bed, hands still shaking. I was 34 years old, a senior forensic accountant trusted with millions in corporate audits, and my own parents thought I'd stolen from them. The worst part, I wasn't even surprised. Not entirely. There had been signs, little things, the way Sarah would roll her eyes when Mom bragged about my promotions. The way Dad had once asked, "Don't you think it's time to settle down, live a little like my career wasn't real life?" Even last Christmas, when I'd offered to cover the cost of a new roof for the house, Michael had muttered something about me trying to buy loyalty. I thought they were just joking. I thought we were still family. I lay back on the comforter and stared at the ceiling. I tried to replay the day Mom asked me to help with her bank account. Every tap, every login, every password reset. Had I missed something? Had someone else seen the notebook we kept in the drawer? It was always unlocked. Anyone could have opened it. Sarah still lived at home off and on, depending on her situation. Michael had a key to the house. I'd been the one to walk Mom through the setup, yes, but that didn't make me the only one who knew. Still, they'd believed it. Believed I'd waited for Mom to get sick just to take her money. $50,000. As if I needed it. As if I would ever. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "We didn't want it to come to this, but you made it hard to trust you. No happy Thanksgiving. No hope you're okay." Just that, as if I'd broken something. As if I was the one who owed them an apology. I turned the phone face down. At work, I spend my days untangling hidden embezzlements, shell companies, and fake invoices. I know what it looks like when money disappears and when someone makes it look like someone else's fault. And right now, someone had made me their fall girl. I stared at the ceiling until the lights blurred. If they wanted to treat me like the criminal in the family, maybe it was time I started investigating like one. The next morning, I woke early. No alarm, just instinct. Years of chasing corporate fraud had taught me one thing. Money never really disappears. It just gets redirected. The trick is knowing where to look first and who benefits. I poured myself a cup of bitter lobby coffee and opened my laptop on the motel desk. My firm had recently been investigating a pattern of elder financial abuse retirees with modest savings accounts that suddenly drained in 3 withdrawals each just below the federal reporting limit. It wasn't just one bank, but one kept coming up more than the others. First Community Bank, Mom's bank. I hadn't told my family that I was involved in the investigation. It was confidential technically, but I had clearance to review the transaction data internally, and I knew exactly who to ask. I sent a quick message to Emma, the compliance officer overseeing our current case. Just a name, a date range, and a location. Within an hour, I had what I needed: timestamps, withdrawal amounts, teller logs. 3 withdrawals from my mother's account spaced 5 days apart. First, $20,000. Second, $15,000. Third, $15,000. Each one done in person, not online. That was the first crack. They'd accused me of using online banking, said I was the only one with access. But if the money was taken in person, it wasn't me. I clicked the attached security footage link. Low resolution, but clear enough. The first video loaded. First Community Bank, November 10th, 1 p.m. A young woman approached the counter, nervously glancing over her shoulder. Blonde, ponytail, gray hoodie, large sunglasses. At first, I thought maybe someone hired a proxy. A stranger paid to impersonate Mom. But then the girl stepped closer to the camera, pulled down her mask to speak to the teller. Sarah, even with the grainy feed, I knew that face. I'd babysat that face. Watched it blow out birthday candles and cry over failed boyfriends. She was fidgeting, tapping her fingers on the counter. She handed over what looked like Mom's ID and signed something. Her handwriting hadn't changed since high school. I leaned back in my chair, the motel light flickering above me. They hadn't just stolen the money. They'd planned it, thought through the timing. Waited until I helped Mom go digital, then used that as cover to frame me. I opened the second video. November 15th, same branch. This time it was Michael. No disguise, no nervous energy, calm, confident. He joked with the teller, signed off like he owned the account. Third video, Sarah, again. Same hoodie, different sunglasses. The arrogance of it made my skin crawl. But there was still a missing piece. How had they gotten access to Mom's ID and account info? Then I remembered something. 2 weeks before I helped Mom set up the app, she'd had outpatient tests at the hospital. Nothing serious, just preliminary scans. Sarah had volunteered to stay overnight with her. Mom's purse had been with her the whole time. Her checkbook, her bank statements, her driver's license. That's where it started. But it didn't end there. I checked the metadata from the account setup. The first login after I left town had come not from Mom's phone, but from a tablet linked to the home Wi-Fi. Same IP address Sarah used when she streamed Netflix. And the OTP one-time password was sent to an alternate email I hadn't registered. I looked it up. The recovery phone number belonged to Michael. They weren't just sloppy. They were arrogant. They thought no one would question it. Not if the successful daughter was the obvious culprit. Not if the rest of the family spoke with one voice. I closed the laptop. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't a moment of desperation or a borrowed amount gone wrong. It was fraud. And they had used my love for Mom as the smokescreen. I zipped the laptop bag closed and picked up the phone. Not to call the police. Not yet. I called my office instead. Asked Emma for something specific. The printouts of the teller signatures. I'd need them for comparison. Then I slid open my suitcase and pulled out a slim black folder, the kind I used for courtroom presentations. If they wanted a villain in the family, I'd show them what it looked like when the villain kept receipts. I didn't call ahead. I drove back Monday afternoon just as the sunlight hit that golden slant it always did between Halloween and Christmas. The kind of light that used to make the house feel like home. Not today. The driveway was full. Michael's truck, Sarah's sedan, Mom's old hatchback. No guests, just family. I parked at the curb, sat for a moment, engine-ticking hands resting on the leather folder in my lap. The one that held every receipt. Every time stamp, every lie they thought no one would notice. Then I stepped out, walked up the porch steps and let myself in. The house smelled like beef stew in thyme. The kitchen lights were on. I could hear the low murmur of conversation, the clatter of silverware, a laugh that didn't belong to me anymore. I found them all in the kitchen. Sarah was perched on the counter, coffee mug and hand legs swinging like she was 13 again. Michael leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Mom stood by the sink drying dishes with slow, practiced movements. Dad was stirring something on the stove. They looked up as I entered and everything stopped. Nobody said anything. I walked past them to the island and placed the folder on the smooth wooden surface where we used to roll out cookie dough. Then I opened it. "You believed I stole from Mom," I said, quietly. "Let me show you what really happened." The air changed, subtle like before a storm. I pulled out the first photo, a still from the bank's security footage. Sarah in sunglasses, leaning over a teller's counter, signing a form. November 10th, $20,000. Not online, not me. No one moved. Not even Sarah. The second photo showed Michael smiling in a navy sweater, handing over a check. November 15th. $15,000. I could feel my voice trembling at the edges, not from anger, but restraint. These were not strangers. These were the people I'd grown up with. Sarah's fingers gripped her mug tighter. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I laid down the teller slips. Same branch, same signatures. I matched them against your handwriting, Sarah, from that note on the fridge last week. A beat passed. Then Sarah finally spoke. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. You went through our stuff." I tilted my head almost gently. "You went through Mom's." Mom reached for the document's eyes, scanning the print, her hands unsteady. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost pleading. "But the bank, they said it was done online." "That's what they thought," I said. "But the withdrawal itself wasn't. The online access came later from a tablet connected to your Wi-Fi. The account was set to recover through an email tied to Michael's phone number." A silence settled over the kitchen like falling snow. Dad stopped stirring. Sarah looked away. Michael stared at the floor like he might find a different truth down there. "You'd let me think my daughter stole from me," Mom whispered. "She wasn't looking at anyone in particular. Maybe not even me. You told me not to come home." I said quieter still, "And you never asked if I did it." That was what stung. Not the accusation, not even the threat of lawyers, the absence of the question. Sarah finally looked at me. Her face twisted not with guilt, but bitterness. "You always get everything. The job, the praise, the respect. I just wanted to level the field." I studied her for a long moment. She looked older than last week. Or maybe I was finally seeing her for the first time. "You didn't level anything," I said. "You burned it." Michael cleared his throat. His voice was flat. She'll be fine, Mom. Valerie makes more than all of us combined. It wasn't personal. I let out a slow breath, fighting the chill crawling up my spine. It's always personal when it's family. I watched Mom sit slowly at the table folder still open before her. Her hands rested in her lap, palms up, like she didn't know what to do with them. Dad finally spoke. Valerie, what are you going to do? I met his eyes. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like the child in the room. I'm not pressing charges, but I've sent the file to the family attorney. You can decide what to do with it. He nodded, once tired, older than I remembered. I zipped the folder shut. My hands moved on their own muscle memory from years of meetings and investigations. This time, it felt final. You told me not to come back unless I returned the money, I said. I didn't take the money, but I brought the truth. I waited just long enough for the words to land. Then I turned. Valerie, Mom's voice broke. I paused at the doorway. Thanksgiving's over, I said. You all made sure of that. I left the house without another word. Didn't take the folder. Didn't take the pie. Just my keys. And whatever part of me still believed they would have chosen me. I didn't drive home right away. I sat in my car outside the house for a while, watching the kitchen window from the curb. No one followed me out. The lights stayed on. Sarah's laughter didn't return. Michael didn't open the door to say anything. No one came running down the driveway to apologize, and that more than anything told me everything I needed to know. Back in Chicago, the city felt sharper, quieter. I returned to work as if nothing had happened, but I wasn't quite the same. I stopped calling on Sunday nights, didn't check the family group chat, left the voicemail icon blinking on my phone for 3 full days before I listened to it. It was from Mom. Valerie, we were wrong. I know that now. I didn't want to believe it. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just wanted you to know. The house feels empty. She hung up before the minute mark. 2 weeks passed. Then a letter came. Real paper, real envelope. Inside was a photo. Me, Sarah, and Michael, ages 6, 8, and 10, sitting on the back porch in mismatched Halloween costumes. I was the scarecrow. Sarah had tinfoil wings. Michael was just covered in red paint. On the back of the photo was a single line. We didn't know how much we would miss you until you were gone. No signature. Michael didn't reach out. Sarah neither, but according to a cousin who still lived nearby, they both moved out of the house. Mom stopped speaking to them, said she needed space. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't offer to come back. Instead, I made something new. I started a weekend seminar at the Community College Financial Protection for older adults. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt like something I could control. One Saturday after class, an older woman came up and said, I wish I had a daughter like you. I smiled politely. Didn't say what I was thinking. So did mine. Once December came and went without a tree, without a call, without the annual ornament exchange I used to plan. There's a kind of grief no one prepares you for, the kind that comes not from death, but from the realization that the people you love chose someone else's version of you over your own. And once they made that choice, they couldn't take it back. I still keep the folder. It's not in my office, not on my desk, just in a drawer near the bookshelf under old tax returns and a copy of the mortgage. I haven't opened it since that night. I don't need to, because the facts haven't changed, and neither have I. Valerie learns a painful but empowering lesson: trust within family can be fragile, and assumptions can fracture even the closest bonds. Accused of stealing $50,000, she uncovers her siblings' betrayal, revealing their envy and deceit. Through her forensic accounting skills, she exposes the truth, realizing that love and loyalty must be mutual. The absence of her family's doubt in her guilt stings more than the accusation itself. By choosing to walk away and build anew, Valerie discovers her strength lies in self-reliance, protecting her integrity over clinging to a family that failed to choose her.
I was sitting in the third row of the massive graduation auditorium at Stanford University, surrounded by my fellow MBA graduates, when I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach. My family had arrived 20 minutes late as usual, shuffling loudly into the row behind me just as the commencement ceremony was beginning. I could smell the alcohol on my father's breath even from my seat in front of him. "This is taking forever," Dad muttered to my mother, not bothering to lower his voice despite the formal nature of the ceremony. I could be watching the game right now. I tried to focus on the keynote speaker, a renowned tech entrepreneur who was discussing innovation and leadership, but Dad's commentary continued throughout the presentation. He criticized everything from the speaker's suit to the length of his speech, making it clear to everyone within earshot that he'd rather be anywhere else. When my name was finally called, Madison Hayes, Master of Business Administration, summa cum laude, I walked across the stage with pride, knowing I'd earned this moment through 4 years of relentless work while building my tech startup. As I accepted my diploma and shook hands with the dean, I caught sight of my family in the audience. Mom was taking pictures with her phone, but Dad was checking his watch and looking visibly bored. After the ceremony concluded, I made my way back to my family, diploma in hand, feeling a mixture of accomplishment and disappointment. This was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of my life, but I could already sense Dad's impending critique of the entire experience. "Well, that was a waste of 3 hours, Dad announced as I approached. "All that fancy talk about changing the world. You know what changes the world? Hard work and common sense, not sitting in classrooms talking about theories." "Dad, I just graduated summa cum laude from one of the top business schools in the country," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "Yeah, and what's that going to get you?" "A fancy piece of paper and a pile of student debt." He leaned closer to me, his voice dropping to what he thought was a whisper but was actually loud enough for people around us to hear clearly. "Madison, let's be realistic here. You'll never amount to anything. All this education nonsense is just delaying the inevitable." I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. This was exactly the kind of undermining comment I'd been hearing from Dad my entire life. When I'd gotten into Stanford, he'd said I was putting on airs. When I'd started my company during my second year, he'd called it playing with computers. Nothing I achieved was ever good enough, successful enough, or practical enough for his approval. What Dad didn't know was that during my 4 years at Stanford, I hadn't just been earning my MBA. I'd been building Codecraft Solutions, a software development company that specialized in creating custom enterprise solutions for Fortune 500 companies. What had started as a small project in my dorm room had grown into a multi-million-dollar business with 43 employees and offices in San Francisco, Austin, and Seattle. "Excuse me," a distinguished voice said from behind us. "Are you talking about Ms. Hayes?" We all turned to see Dr. Richard Sterling, the president of Stanford University, approaching our group with a warm smile. He was flanked by 2 other university officials and what appeared to be a reporter from the Stanford Alumni magazine. "Yes," Dad said, suddenly straightening up and putting on his best talking to important people voice. "This is my daughter Madison. We're very proud of her." "As you should be," Dr. Sterling replied. "Ms. Hayes, I was hoping to catch you before you left. I wanted to personally thank you for your extraordinary generosity to our university." I felt my stomach drop. Dr. Sterling was about to reveal something I'd specifically asked to keep confidential until after graduation. "What generosity?" Dad asked, looking confused. "Sir, your daughter has just made the largest single donation by an alumnus in Stanford's history. $50 million for our new engineering building." The color drained from Dad's face completely. Mom's phone slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. My brother Kevin, who'd been half listening while scrolling through social media, suddenly looked up with his mouth hanging open. $50 million? Dad repeated, his voice barely audible. $50 million, Dr. Sterling confirmed enthusiastically. The Madison Hayes Center for Innovation will be breaking ground this fall. It will house our most advanced computer science and engineering programs, providing state-of-the-art facilities for the next generation of tech leaders. I could see Dad's mind racing trying to process this information. According to his understanding of my life, I was a recent graduate with student loans and no significant income. The idea that I had $50 million to donate to anything was completely incomprehensible to him. But how? Mom started to ask, then stopped herself. Dr. Sterling smiled proudly. Your daughter is the founder and CEO of Codecraft Solutions. I assume you know about her remarkable success in the tech industry. The silence from my family was deafening. Kevin was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Mom looked like she was about to faint. Dad appeared to be having some kind of mental breakdown, opening and closing his mouth without any words coming out. Actually, I said quietly, they don't know about my company. Dr. Sterling's expression shifted to surprise, then understanding. Oh, I see. Well, perhaps this is a conversation for later. Ms. Hayes, would you like to schedule a time this week to discuss the building plans and the naming ceremony? That would be perfect, Dr. Sterling. Thank you. After the university president and his team moved on to greet other graduates, my family stood in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Dad found his voice. Madison, what the hell is going on here? Dad, maybe we should go somewhere private to talk about this. No, we're talking about it right here. How do you have $50 million to give away? I took a deep breath, realizing there was no way to ease into this conversation. I own a software company. We develop enterprise solutions for major corporations. Last year we generated $180 million in revenue. That's impossible, Kevin said. You're a student. You live in a tiny apartment and drive a 10-year-old Honda. I live modestly because I prefer to invest my money rather than spend it on unnecessary luxuries. And yes, I've been a student, but I've also been running a company for the past 4 years. What kind of company? Mom asked, her voice shaky. We create custom software solutions for Fortune 500 companies. Inventory management systems, customer relationship platforms, data analytics tools. Big corporations pay us millions of dollars to solve their technical problems. Dad was shaking his head repeatedly. This doesn't make sense. If you had that kind of money, why didn't you tell us? Because of exactly what you said 10 minutes ago, Dad. Because you told me I'd never amount to anything. Because every time I've tried to share good news with this family, you've found a way to minimize it or criticize it. But $50 million is what I decided to donate to Stanford because this university gave me the education and connections that made my success possible. It's an investment in the future of technology and innovation. How much money do you actually have? Kevin asked bluntly. I looked around at the other families celebrating nearby, realizing this was probably not the ideal place for this conversation. Kevin, I'm worth approximately $340 million. Mom sat down heavily on the nearest bench. Dad continued staring at me like I was a stranger. Kevin pulled out his phone and started typing frantically, probably Googling my company. Holy shit, Kevin said, looking at his screen. Codecraft Solutions is listed as one of the fastest growing tech companies in California. Madison Hayes, CEO and founder. Net worth estimated between $300 to $400 million. Language, Kevin, Mom said automatically, even though she was clearly in shock. Mom, Madison is worth more money than we'll see in 10 lifetimes, and she's been hiding it from us for years. I wasn't hiding it, I said defensively. I was protecting it. There's a difference. Protecting it from what? Dad demanded. From this. From you making it about money instead of family. From you suddenly treating me differently because of my bank account instead of who I am as a person. Madison, this changes everything, Mom said softly. No, it doesn't. I'm the same person I was an hour ago. The only thing that's changed is what you know about my financial situation. Why didn't you trust us with this information? Dad asked, and for the first time since the revelation he sounded hurt rather than angry. I sat down on the bench next to Mom, suddenly feeling exhausted by the emotional weight of this conversation. Dad, 3 months ago when I mentioned that I was thinking about buying a house, you told me I was being unrealistic and that I should focus on finding a husband to support me instead of chasing impossible dreams. I was trying to be practical. 6 months ago when I said I was considering starting a nonprofit foundation, you said I should worry about taking care of myself before trying to save the world. Madison, I didn't know. Exactly. You didn't know because you never asked about my work. You never showed interest in what I was building. Every conversation we've had for the past 4 years has been you telling me what I can't do, what I'll never achieve, what I need to be more realistic about. Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment. You were protecting yourself from having to acknowledge that your daughter might be more successful than you expected. That's not fair, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Dad, you've been undermining my confidence and dismissing my ambitions my entire life. Did you really think I was going to share my biggest successes with someone who consistently told me I was aiming too high? Mom reached over and took my hand. Madison, we had no idea you felt that way. Because you never asked how I felt. You just assumed that my goals were unrealistic and my plans were naive. So what happens now? Kevin asked. Are you going to keep pretending to be broke? I'm not pretending to be anything. I live according to my values, not my bank account. I drive a reliable car because I don't need a status symbol. I live in a modest apartment because I'd rather invest in my business and charitable causes than in expensive real estate. But Madison, Mom said, you could have anything you want. I do have everything I want. I have a successful company that I'm passionate about. I have the resources to make a positive impact on the world. I have the freedom to pursue projects that matter to me. What about a family? A husband? Kids? Dad asked. What about them? Well, with your success, you could attract a really good husband now. I stared at him in disbelief. Dad, do you hear yourself? You're suggesting that my value as a potential wife has increased because I have money. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. And it's exactly why I didn't tell you about my success. Because you immediately started thinking about how my money could benefit our family rather than celebrating what I've accomplished. Dr. Sterling approached our group again, this time with a small camera crew from the local news station. Ms. Hayes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Channel 7 would like to do a brief interview about your donation and your company's success. Would you be available for a few minutes? I looked at my family, all of whom were staring at me with expressions ranging from pride to confusion to something that might have been awe. Of course, Dr. Sterling. The next 20 minutes were surreal. I found myself being interviewed on live television about my company's growth, my plans for the future, and my commitment to supporting education and innovation. The reporter asked thoughtful questions about the challenges of building a tech company while completing graduate school, and I found myself enjoying the opportunity to talk about the work I was truly passionate about. Throughout the interview, I could see my family standing in the background, watching and listening as I discussed projects and achievements they'd never heard of. I talked about our latest contract with Apple to develop a new inventory management system. I mentioned our partnership with Microsoft on a machine learning project. I explained our company's commitment to hiring diverse talent and supporting underrepresented groups in technology. When the interview concluded, I rejoined my family, who were all looking at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Madison, Dad said slowly, I owe you an apology. For what specifically? For everything. For not believing in you. For not supporting your dreams. For telling you that you'd never amount to anything when you've clearly accomplished more than I ever imagined possible. Dad, I didn't build this company to prove you wrong. I know. That's what makes it even more impressive. You did this for yourself despite my discouragement. I did it because I love technology and I love solving problems. The financial success was a bonus, not the goal. Mom was crying quietly. Madison, I'm so proud of you. And I'm so sorry we made you feel like you couldn't share this with us. I wanted to share it with you. I wanted you to be excited about my work and proud of what I was building. But every time I tried to talk about my goals, I got shut down. We'll do better, Kevin said. I want to hear about everything. Your company, your projects, your plans for the future. I'd like that. Dad stood up and, for the first time in years, gave me a genuine hug. Madison, I was wrong about everything. You've accomplished something extraordinary, and I'm sorry I wasn't supportive when you needed me to be. Dad, I forgive you. But I need you to understand that this is who I've always been. Ambitious, driven, capable. The money is new, but my character isn't. I see that now. And I promise to do better. Good. Because I'd like you to be involved in my life. The real version of my life, not the version you thought you knew. Over the following months, my relationship with my family changed dramatically. Dad started asking detailed questions about my work and even began offering suggestions based on his decades of experience in manufacturing. Mom became one of my biggest cheerleaders, sharing news of my company's achievements with her friends and colleagues. Kevin decided to switch his major to computer science and asked if he could intern at Codecraft Solutions during the summer. The Madison Hayes Center for Innovation at Stanford opened 18 months later, and my entire family attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Dad gave a speech about how proud he was of his daughter's achievements and how sorry he was for not recognizing her potential sooner. I spent years telling Madison she needed to be more realistic about her goals, he told the assembled crowd. It turns out I was the one who needed to be more realistic about her capabilities. After the ceremony, as we toured the state-of-the-art facilities that would train the next generation of engineers and computer scientists, Dad pulled me aside. Madison, I have a question. What's that? That day at graduation when Dr. Sterling first mentioned your donation, did you know this was going to happen? You mean did I know you were going to find out about my company? Yeah. I smiled. Dad, I donated that money specifically because I knew the university would announce it during graduation. I wanted you to find out in a way that would make it impossible for you to dismiss or minimize. You planned the whole thing? I planned for you to finally understand who I really am and what I'm capable of achieving. That's brilliant. And a little bit sneaky. I learned from the best. You always said I was too clever for my own good. I was wrong about that too. You're exactly as clever as you need to be. As we walked through the building that bore my name, surrounded by students working on projects that would shape the future of technology, I realized that the best gift I'd given myself wasn't the financial success or even the recognition. It was the courage to stop hiding my achievements and start demanding the respect I'd earned. The Hayes family had finally learned that sometimes the person you underestimate most is the one who will surprise you the most. The rain was coming down in sheets as I pulled into the parking lot of Rosewood Memorial Chapel. Through my windshield I could see the black-clad figures hurrying toward the entrance, their umbrellas fighting against the wind. Dad would have laughed at the weather. He always said that if it was going to rain at his funeral, it should at least be dramatic about it. I sat in my car for a few extra minutes, gathering the courage to face what I knew would be a difficult day. Not because I was burying my father. We'd said our real goodbye 3 weeks ago in the ICU when he was still conscious enough to squeeze my hand. This would be difficult because I'd have to sit through 2 hours of my family's performance of grief while pretending I hadn't been the one holding everything together for the past 6 months. When I finally walked into the chapel, the first thing I noticed was how beautiful it looked. The funeral director had followed my instructions perfectly, white lilies everywhere, Dad's favorite jazz playlist playing softly in the background, and a photo display showcasing his life from childhood through his retirement party. It was exactly what he would have wanted, down to the specific brand of coffee being served in the reception area. My brother Marcus was standing near the front of the chapel, receiving condolences from a steady stream of visitors. He looked appropriately somber in his expensive black suit, playing the role of grieving eldest son with practiced precision. Our sister Jennifer was beside him, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while directing people toward the guest book. I started walking toward them, intending to take my place with the family, when Marcus noticed me approaching. "You can't see in the family section," he whispered harshly, stepping into my path. I stopped short, confused. "What? You never contributed anything," he continued, his voice low but venomous. "The rest of us have been handling everything while you've been off doing whatever it is you do." People were starting to stare. I could feel the weight of their curious gazes as they wondered why the deceased's daughter was being turned away by her own brother. "Marcus, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time. Dad's gone and now we need to figure out how to move forward as a family. That means the people who actually stepped up get to make the decisions." Jennifer moved closer, her expression apologetic but not contradictory. "Anna, maybe it would be better if you sat toward the back today. Just to avoid any complications." Complications. As if my presence at my own father's funeral was somehow problematic. I stayed in the back row silently. I found an empty seat in the last row, next to an elderly woman I didn't recognize who smelled like lavender and gave me a sympathetic smile. From there, I watched my family perform their grief for the assembled crowd of Dad's friends, colleagues, and neighbors. Marcus delivered a eulogy about what a wonderful father Dad had been, how he taught them the value of hard work and family loyalty. Jennifer read a poem about eternal love and the bonds that death cannot break. Our cousin David shared a funny story about Dad's legendary barbecue skills and his insistence on wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the cook," well into his 70s. They were good stories and they were true. Dad had been all of those things, a devoted father, a hard worker, a man who loved to cook for his family and tell terrible jokes that somehow always made us laugh anyway. What they didn't mention was who had been there during the long nights in the hospital. Who had researched experimental treatments and fought with insurance companies and held Dad's hand when the pain medication made him confused and scared. Who had arranged for the home hospice care and coordinated with the medical team and made sure he was never alone during those final weeks. But I stayed silent, letting them have their moment. After all, this was their show. I was just the daughter who never contributed anything. The service was beautiful. The music was perfect, the flowers were stunning, and the funeral director managed everything with seamless professionalism. Dad would have been pleased, I thought, watching as his casket was carried out by 6 pallbearers that Marcus had selected from among his golf buddies and former co-workers. After the service, the funeral director approached him. "Sir, your sister paid for everything, including your father's $80,000 medical bills." I was gathering my purse and preparing to leave when I heard Marcus's raised voice from the front of the chapel. "What do you mean, payment arrangements?" Harold Morrison, the funeral director, looked uncomfortable as he consulted his clipboard. "Well, sir, as I explained when we first met, the total cost for today's service comes to $23,400. That includes the casket, the memorial service, the reception, the flowers, and the transportation. Right, and I told you we'd handle payment after the service." "Actually, sir, the bill has already been settled. Your sister took care of everything when she came in last week to finalize the arrangements." Marcus turned to look at Jennifer, confusion evident on his face. "Jen, did you—" "No, I thought you were handling the finances." "Your other sister," Harold clarified, gesturing toward where I was standing. "Miss Anna Williams. She also wanted me to give you this envelope." I watched from my position near the back as Harold handed Marcus a thick manila envelope. My brother's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching alarm as he tore it open and began reading the documents inside. The first page was the receipt for the funeral expenses, $23,400, paid in full by Anna Williams. The second page was a copy of the invoice for Dad's final week in the private ICU room, $34,000, paid by Anna Williams. The third page was a summary of Dad's cancer treatment costs over the past 6 months, $80,000 in medical bills, all bearing the same payment notation. Marcus's face went white as he flipped through page after page of expenses I'd covered. The home modifications to accommodate Dad's wheelchair, the specialized medical equipment, the round-the-clock nursing care during his final weeks, the experimental treatment that insurance had refused to cover. Jennifer was reading over his shoulder, her own expression shifting from shock to something that might have been shame. "She paid for all of this?" Jennifer whispered. Harold nodded. "Ms. Williams has been handling your father's medical expenses for quite some time. She's also the one who arranged for today's service. She came in personally to select the flowers, choose the music, and coordinate with the catering staff." Marcus was still staring at the papers. "But we never asked her to. According to my notes, she specifically requested that the family not be informed of the payment arrangements until after the service. She wanted to ensure that financial concerns didn't interfere with your ability to grieve. I decided this was my cue to leave. I'd stayed for the service, paid my respects, and now my work was done. I started walking toward the exit, hoping to avoid the confrontation that was clearly brewing." "Anna. Wait." Marcus's voice stopped me just as I reached the chapel doors. I turned to see him jogging toward me, the envelope clutched in his hand. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do." "Yes, we do. These bills. Anna, this is over $100,000. "I'm aware of the amount. Where did you get this kind of money?" It was a fair question, I supposed. To my family, I was still the little sister who'd moved away after college and worked some kind of computer job that they'd never bothered to understand. They knew I lived alone in a downtown condo and drove a modest car, but beyond that, they'd never shown much interest in the details of my life. "I have a good job, Marcus." "Nobody has that good of a job." Jennifer had joined us by then, along with several other family members who were clearly curious about the heated discussion happening in the chapel lobby. "Anna," Jennifer said softly, "we had no idea Dad's medical bills were so expensive. Why didn't you tell us?" "When would I have told you? During one of your monthly phone calls where you complained about your own problems for 20 minutes and then hung up? Or maybe during one of your visits to see Dad, which happened—" "Oh, that's right, they didn't happen." "That's not fair," Marcus protested. "We have our own families to worry about. Our own responsibilities." "So do I. But you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage." "I have a mortgage, Marcus. I also have a business to run, employees to manage, and clients who depend on me. But when Dad got sick, I made time." "What kind of business?" Jennifer asked. It was the first time in years that either of them had asked me a direct question about my work. "I own a cybersecurity consulting firm." We work with mid-size companies to protect their data and networks from cyber attacks. Marcus blinked. You own it. I founded it 8 years ago. We have 47 employees and offices in 3 cities. But you never said. You never asked. The truth was, I tried to share my professional successes with them over the years. When I'd landed my first major client, when I'd hired my first employee, when we'd opened our second office, I'd called them with the news, excited to share my accomplishments with my family. But their responses had always been polite disinterest at best, subtle criticism at worst. "That's nice, dear," had been Mom's standard response. "But don't you think it's time to settle down and find a nice man?" Marcus's reaction had typically been some variation of, "Computer stuff, huh? Well, I guess someone has to do it." After a while, I'd stopped trying to include them in my professional life. It was easier to let them think I had some mundane office job than to constantly defend my choices and explain why I'd chosen career success over traditional family milestones. "Anna," Jennifer said, "we owe you an apology." "For what specifically?" "For not being there when Dad was sick. For not helping with the expenses. For not." She gestured helplessly. "For not being better siblings. And for what I said earlier," Marcus added, though he looked like the words were physically painful. "About you not contributing anything. Obviously that was completely wrong." Yes, it was. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, surrounded by the lingering smell of lilies and the quiet conversations of departing mourners. Can we start over?" Jennifer asked finally. "Start over how?" "I don't know. Maybe we could actually try to be a family. Actually talk to each other about our lives, support each other when things get difficult. Like we should have been doing all along," Marcus added. I looked at my brother and sister, really looked at them, for the first time in years. Marcus was 42, with gray creeping into his hair and worry lines around his eyes that suggested his successful law practice wasn't as stress-free as he liked to pretend. Jennifer was 38. Still beautiful but with the exhausted expression of a woman juggling 2 young children and a demanding job as a marketing executive. They weren't bad people. They were just people who'd gotten so caught up in their own lives that they'd forgotten to pay attention to anyone else's. "The thing is," I said carefully, "starting over requires both parties to actually put in effort. It means asking how someone's doing and actually listening to the answer. It means showing up when things get difficult, not just when it's convenient." "We understand," Jennifer said. "Do you?" "Because 6 months ago when Dad was diagnosed, I called both of you to discuss treatment options and care arrangements. Marcus, you said you'd check your calendar and get back to me. You never did. Jennifer, you said you'd research hospice care options and then disappeared for 3 weeks. They both looked ashamed, which was appropriate. "Anna, we're sorry," Marcus said. We thought you had everything under control." I did have everything under control. But that doesn't mean I didn't need support. "You're right," Jennifer said. "And we failed you. We failed Dad too. So what now?" Marcus asked. "How do we fix this?" I thought about it for a moment. These were the people I'd grown up with, the ones who'd known me before I became successful, before I learned to be independent and self-sufficient. Despite everything, they were still my family. "We start by being honest with each other," I said finally. "About our lives, our struggles, our successes. We check in regularly, not just when someone dies or gets married or has a crisis. And we pay you back," Marcus added. "For all of this. It might take time, but we'll figure out a payment plan." "I don't want your money." "But Anna, it's over $100,000. I know what it cost. And I chose to pay it because I wanted Dad to have the best possible care during his final months. That was my gift to him and my responsibility as his daughter." "But we should have been sharing that responsibility," Jennifer protested. "Yes, you should have. But you can't retroactively change the past 6 months. What you can do is be better going forward." "What does that look like?" Marcus asked. "It looks like calling each other once a week just to check in. It looks like celebrating each other's successes instead of ignoring them. It looks like showing up when someone needs help, even if it's inconvenient. And it looks like actually getting to know each other as adults," Jennifer added. "Because honestly, Anna, I had no idea you were running a successful business. I still think of you as my little sister who was good at math." I smiled at that. "I am good at math. That's part of why the business works." "Tell us about it," Marcus said. "Really. I want to understand what you do." So I did. Standing there in the chapel lobby, surrounded by the lingering traces of Dad's memorial service, I told them about my company. About the clients we served and the problems we solved. About the satisfaction of building something from nothing, of creating jobs for talented people, of protecting businesses from threats they didn't even know existed. They listened, really listened, asking thoughtful questions and showing genuine interest in my work for the first time in years. "I'm proud of you," Jennifer said when I finished. "I should have been saying that all along." "We both should have," Marcus agreed. "And we should have been here to help with Dad." "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." 6 months later, we were having our weekly family dinner at my condo. It had become a tradition. Every Sunday evening, the three of us would get together to cook, eat, and catch up on each other's lives. Tonight, Marcus was chopping vegetables for salad while telling us about a difficult case he was working on. Jennifer was stirring pasta sauce and sharing funny stories about her kids' latest adventures. And I was setting the table while updating them on a new contract my company had just landed with a major healthcare network. "So the hospital system has been getting targeted by ransomware attacks," I was explaining, "and they need us to completely overhaul their security infrastructure." "How long will that take?" Jennifer asked. "About 6 months for the full implementation. But it's a great contract, not just financially but because healthcare security is so important. We're literally helping protect patient data and medical records." "That's amazing," Marcus said. "You're like a digital superhero." I laughed. "I think that's overstating it a bit." "Is it though? You're protecting people from cyber criminals. That seems pretty heroic to me." It was a far cry from the days when they dismissed my work as computer stuff. Now they understood not just what I did but why it mattered. "Speaking of work," Jennifer said, "I have news." "Good news or bad news?" I asked. "Good news. I got the promotion." Marcus and I both cheered. Jennifer had been working toward a senior vice president position at her marketing firm for over a year, and we'd all been anxiously waiting to hear the results of her final interview. "That's fantastic," I said. "When do you start?" "Next month. And the best part is the new role has better work-life balance. More strategic planning, less crisis management." "Perfect," Marcus said. "You've been burning the candle at both ends for too long," says the man who worked through his vacation last month. Jennifer teased. "That was different. We were in the middle of depositions." "There's always something," I pointed out. "You have to make time for life outside of work." "Listen to you," Marcus said. "The woman who used to work 18-hour days lecturing me about work-life balance. I learned from experience. And I had good teachers." "Who?" "Dad. During those last few weeks he kept telling me that the most important thing wasn't how successful my business was, but whether I was building relationships that would last beyond my career." We were quiet for a moment, remembering. "He was right," Jennifer said softly. "Success doesn't mean much if you don't have people to share it with." "Which is why these dinners are so important," I said. "Whatever else is happening in our lives, we show up for each other." "Every week," Marcus agreed. "No matter what." "Even when I'm traveling for work?" Jennifer asked. "Especially when you're traveling for work. That's what video calls are for." As we sat down to eat, I looked around the table at my brother and sister and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The warm certainty of being part of a real family. Not a perfect family. We still had our moments of disagreement and misunderstanding. But a family that showed up for each other, celebrated each other's successes, and provided support during difficult times. It had taken Dad's death to bring us together, but somehow I thought he would be pleased with the result. He'd always believed that family was the most important thing, more valuable than money or success or professional achievement. Turns out he was right about that too. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, Marcus handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "For my share of Dad's medical expenses." "Marcus, I told you." "I know what you told me. But Jennifer and I talked about it and we want to contribute. Not because we have to, but because we want to be part of taking care of Dad, even if it's after the fact." I opened the envelope and saw a check for $35,000. "This is too much. It's exactly 1/3 of the total expenses. Jennifer has a check for the same amount." "You guys, I really don't need." "It's not about what you need," Jennifer interrupted. "It's about what we need. We need to feel like we did our part, like we contributed to Dad's care in some meaningful way." I looked at both of them, understanding finally dawning. This wasn't about the money. This was about their need to feel like they'd honored their father, even if they couldn't change the past. Okay, I said, accepting the check. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus replied. For everything. For taking care of Dad, for giving us a second chance, for teaching us what it really means to be a family. We all taught each other, I said. That's what family does. And for the first time since Dad's funeral, I felt like we finally understood what he'd been trying to teach us all along. That love isn't just about the good times and the celebrations. It's about showing up when things get difficult, contributing what you can, and never giving up on the people who matter most. Even when they don't sit with you in the family section. Even when they think you've never contributed anything. Even when it takes a funeral to remind everyone what family really means.